This is what dictators do. This is a dictatorial exercise of power that should frighten and call on all Republicans to say, Mr. President, you cannot do this.
This has a huge chilling effect for national security officials. The notion that this is unprecedented, the notion of an enemies list.
It's a clear abuse of power, and it's a mark of an authoritarian dictator, really, rather than a democratically elected president of the United States.
Well, that's all very subtle, don't you think? Well, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul made a bold suggestion to President Trump late last month. Strip former CIA Director John Brennan of his security clearance, along with many other former government officials acting irresponsibly. And, of course, President Trump is now doing exactly that. So does Senator Paul deserve some kudos here? The senator joins us now exclusively with reaction and details on his recent trip to Russia. Senator, great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
You came back to some pretty powerful news. I mean, were you the first one to suggest this to the president? And did you talk to him about this since you've returned?
I'm going to talk to him about it this weekend some, about the trip to Russia and also about John Brennan. I've been calling for a review of the security clearances of a lot of folks, you know, Peter Strzok and others, for months and months and months. I wrote a letter to the FBI director last January asking, does he still have clearance? But with John Brennan, I think what the left is ignoring is that I think he should have had his clearance revoked for cause. You know, he leaked information that came out in the media that we had a double agent in Yemen. Remember when we were going after the underwear bomber? There still is a bomb maker in Yemen. He leaked that to the media, to people, Richard Clark, who had a security clearance, and then he went on television saying, oh, not to worry, we have a double agent in Yemen. The double agent was still there, and he put that agent's life at risk. John Brennan should have been fired for that alone.
And then the spying on the Senate committee, the Dianne Feinstein, like, you guys are looking into my staff's computers. He denies it. They get the results of from the documents. It turns out they were totally spying.
There's also a question of whether he lied to the House Intelligence Committee when he said he did not know who paid for the fake Trump dossier. He said, oh, I didn't know. So there's two possibilities. He's either lying or he's incompetent. Because if he's in charge of the CIA and they're using this fake dossier and no one bothered to ask who paid for it.
Didn't he say he didn't know about it initially?
I think he said he didn't know it was paid for.
Oh, it was like kind of fuzzy.
Yeah, so the head of the CIA doesn't know that this fake dossier was paid for by the Clinton campaign. So that's either incompetence or he's lying, one of the two.
Senator, he was pressed on this about Brennan yesterday, and about the security clearance. Brennan was pressed on it yesterday, and then he was pressed on, well, could it be that the president is answering to a third party, not just to the American voters? Let's watch.
I don't know. He is the one who has to account for those previous actions. And I don't know what he may be concerned about in terms of what might be divulged as part of this investigation. I find his attitude and behavior toward Vladimir Putin and the Russians very, very puzzling. I don't know what it is that is behind that. I certainly don't know all the things that Mr. Trump has been involved in over the years, and I do not pretend to have that knowledge.
Yeah, and today, all those I don't know, Senator, but today the New York Times, he writes in part at the end, Mr. Trump's claims of no collusion are, in a word, hogwash. But he apparently says he doesn't know, but then his claims of no collusion are hogwash. No, the man is unhinged. I mean, that's the whole statement there. Unhinged.
All right. Well, the thing is that, you know, you look at a guy who called the president treasonous. So the commander-in-chief he calls treasonous, and apparently that would be advocating for the death penalty for the president, and yet he still wants access to the nation's secret. You know, crazy.
So Russia, you just came back from your trip to the former Soviet Union. You met, I know, with top government officials, both in the what's equivalent of their legislature. What can you tell the American people tonight about the state of U.S.-Russian relations under President Trump?
I think from both sides that our relations are at the worst ebb that they've been since the height of the Cold War. And this is a real tragedy. One of the great things that Ronald Reagan did was sitting down with Gorbachev. And so one of the highlights for me is I got to sit down for an hour with former President Gorbachev and talk about his recollections with Ronald Reagan, but also talk about how both sides, both Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev, had to defy the orthodoxy of their country to sit down and come to agreements. And they didn't, you know, call each other names. They didn't say murderous thug and talk about all the terrible things. some of which did happen throughout a long period of time in the Soviet Union, they sat down and said, let's try to make it better. And they did.
Are some of these government officials going to be coming to the United States? I know you had extended an invitation. There was some thought of Trump meeting with Putin. I guess that's off the table. Right. I mean, there's a lot on the table, off the table. I think people are very confused about this.
They have two houses in their parliament, one called the Federation, which is like our Senate, their upper body, and then they have the Duma, which is the lower body. They have both agreed to come to Washington in the fall for further meetings. That's a good thing. The downside is the chairman of each of the committees is banned from coming to the United States because of sanctions. So one of the things I'm going to ask the president, I'm going to talk to the president this weekend, is I'm going to say, why don't we take people off the list
at least temporarily,
who are in the legislature?
Yeah, or at least temporarily so they can come and come and speak. Senator Paul, we really appreciate your coming in tonight, and thank you for giving the update on the trip.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. Former CIA Director John Brennan has proven to be many things. He is dishonest, having lied to the American people multiple times while working as director of the CIA. He's irresponsible. He's accused his political opponents of treason, a death penalty offense, without offering any evidence at all. But above all, Brennan is vocal. For the past year, he has shouted his views on every possible political topic, as is his right. Well, giving his opinion is literally his job now, actually. He's a cable news pundit. Yesterday, the Trump administration finally revoked his security clearance. Now, why was John Brennan able to keep his top-secret clearance after leaving government in the first place? Do other MSNBC contributors have security clearances? If so, what national interest is served by that? And how did somebody so obviously limited intellectually get to be CIA director in the first place? Those are all valid questions. No one on the left even bothered to try to explain any of those things. Instead, they started yelling about how Brennan's rights were being violated.
He knows the Russian collusion angle, and that's what Trump is trying to silence.
Nixonian-type practices of trying to silence anyone who's willing to criticize this president.
The larger implication here is the jeopardy to our First Amendment rights, and by extension, others.
Hear that? The First Amendment. Because you really don't have freedom of speech unless you also have a top-secret government security clearance. Brennan, of course, agreed with that. He wrote a piece claiming that Trump revoked his clearance, quote, to try to silence anyone who would dare challenge him. Where was Brennan's essay about being silenced published? Well, in the New York Times, a newspaper with 3 million subscribers. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what it looks like to be muzzled. Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, who not only is a fake war hero, but also a graduate of Yale Law School, argued that Brennan somehow has a constitutional right to a security clearance. Notice how Blumenthal keeps a straight face as he says this. Watch.
It is not only an abuse of power, it is illegal. When the founders of our great nation decided on the First Amendment, it was because the King of England would retaliate against his critics. He has the authority to do a lot of things, but not in a way that violates the law.
Thanks for the lesson on the law, Senator. So here's the takeaway. John Brennan has a constitutional right to a federal security clearance, though he does not work for the federal government. You do not have that right. Neither do I or anyone you know. Only John Brennan has that right because he resides in a special class of elites that you are obligated to obey. And by the way, if you disagree with any of that, you are a monster. You are on the side of bloodthirsty dictators like Stalin and Pol Pot. Watch as more dumb people talk.
What we're seeing today is this is what dictators do. This is a dictatorial exercise of power that should frighten.
It's a clear abuse of power, and it's a mark of an authoritarian dictator.
This is a striking move towards authoritarianism. You know, this is what dictators do. They shut down the press, they shut down dissent, they jail their opponents.
So he's a dictator. Let that settle in for a minute. If Trump is a dictator, he may be the single most incompetent dictator in world history. For example, he lets all these morons go on cable television and accuse him of crimes, but doesn't do anything about it. They keep talking. Somebody had better alert the secret police. But wait, the secret police are busy right now. They're watching MSNBC and nodding along in agreement. It's that kind of dictatorship, a looser, more Mediterranean version where no one actually gets repressed. Of course, if you're looking for a more Germanic style of authoritarianism, we have that too in the United States, but it's not in the White House. It's in Silicon Valley, which is happy to prevent you from expressing your views in public if they disagree with those views. That's everywhere these days. And yet, amazingly, somehow, the champions of speech you just watched, First Amendment absolutists like Senator Blumenthal, who learned the value of the Constitution while pretending to serve in Vietnam, haven't noticed. It's odd, isn't it?
And in an op-ed in the New York Times this morning, John Brennan fired back at the White House and at the president in particular, stating that Mr. Trump clearly has become more desperate to protect himself and those close to him, which is why he made the politically motivated decision to revoke my security clearance in an attempt to scare and to silence others who might challenge him. Brennan added Mr. Trump's claims of no collusion are, in a word, hogwash. This is a move that the White House has been considering for weeks. It was in part inspired by Senator Rand Paul, who on July 23rd tweeted, quote, "Is John Brennan monetizing his security clearance? Is John Brennan making millions of dollars divulging secrets to the mainstream media with his attacks on @real Donald Trump?" And on the same day, Rand Paul tweeted, quote, "Today I will meet with the president and I will ask him to revoke John Brennan's security clearance." Well, now that it has happened, Senator Paul is applauding the move. Representative Adam Schiff, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, is equating the move to Richard Nixon's enemy list. Quote, "In adding John Brennan to his enemies list, Trump demonstrates again how deeply insecure and vindictive he is. Two character flaws dangerous in any president. An enemies list is ugly, undemocratic, and un-American. I also believe this action to silence a critic is unlawful." And in an interview today yesterday with the Wall Street Journal, President Trump said that he would have made this move last week, but that things were simply too hectic. And he made the decision because he believes that Brennan played a role in the entire Russian collusion narrative. He said, quote, "I call it the rigged witch hunt. It is a sham, and these people led it. So I think it's something that had to be done." The White House also warned that more security clearance revocations are under consideration for James Clapper, James Comey, Michael Hayden, Sally Yates, Susan Rice, Andrew McCabe, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, and Bruce Orr. Orr, by the way, is set to testify behind closed doors before the House Intelligence Committee this coming August 28th, only 12 days away. Sandra, back to you.
All right, Doug McKelvey, thank you.
Brennan has been an outspoken critic for about 2 years now, but was this the right move, sir?
Yes, it was. And again, it has nothing to do with starting the Russian investigation or anything else. First of all, the president has the absolute right to do it. Secondly, the only purpose of maintaining a security clearance is if a president or the administration may want to consider you for consultation during a crisis. No one would consult John Brennan in a crisis. He was one of the most political CIA directors. I believe the report that he rushed through near the end of the Obama administration totally slanted what really happened as far as the Russian involvement in the election. John Brennan, you speak to any number of present and retired CIA officials, they will tell you that they do not respect him. And the fact that he would accuse the President of the United States of treason, which, by the way, is a capital offense, that's a death penalty offense, that he would say that, he should not be given the dignity or have the status when he goes around the world or appears on television as having a security clearance. I mean, that is an honor and it's a privilege. It's not a right. He's abused the honor and the privilege. The president should have done this a long time ago.
Okay, here's the list that Kevin Corke just mentioned. It's a who's who. It's Comey, McCabe, Clapper, Rice, Hayden, Yates, Page, Orr, Strzok. Do you think more justifiably will come on that list, sir?
Some could. But I would just say off the top that Michael Hayden, while he's a critic of the president, he's very patriotic. He's sincere in what he says. And I would urge the president not to take away Michael Hayden's security clearance. As far as Comey and McCabe and Strzok, I believe they already have lost them once they left the FBI. I could be wrong. But I would say the main offender there would be Brennan and also General Clapper, who's really disappointed me.
The reaction from Brennan and others has been that this is simply revenge. What would you say to that?
No, it's a common sense decision. It's saying that just because you happen to hold a position at one time does not give you a lifetime security clearance. It's an honor and it's a privilege to have it. And both, certainly Brennan has abused it. And no one's going to keep John Brennan from speaking out. It's interesting, he got so involved claiming, about Russia being involved in the election, and he's the one that voted for a Communist Party candidate for president once. So if we're going into people's background and how irresponsible they were, there's John Brennan. But no, listen, this isn't revenge. I mean, I can see why the president's angry and mad, But the fact is, there was a very legitimate governmental reason to take away John Brennan's security clearance.
Peter Strzok's attorney is out with a statement. He's been in the news, as you know, being terminated, fired from the FBI. Here's his lawyer. By revoking Director Brennan's clearance and threatening the security clearance of Pete and 7 other former officials on Trump's enemies list, the president has taken us down one more step on the path toward authoritarianism. Brennan is quoted as saying that when the president has claims of no collusion, Brennan calls that hogwash. You just referred to the Russia matter. You've been knee-deep in this investigation as well. Is it hogwash, right, sir, or not?
I can tell you, having sat through any number of witnesses, almost all of the key witnesses, having read the transcript of the testimony, so far there's absolutely no evidence of collusion. And for Brennan or Strzok, any of them to say that shows the inherent bias that they have and why they never should have been involved in this to begin with. And for Peter Strzok, or his lawyer, to be commenting on anything. I mean, this man disgraced himself, disgraced the FBI, and so he certainly has lost all moral authority, any authority for anyone to listen to him speak whatsoever.
A lot of reaction already and more to come. Certainly, Peter King, thank you, the Republican from New York with us today out of Babylon, New York. Thank you, sir.